Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the March meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at North Norfolk District Council. I don't think we've got anybody who doesn't know where the loos are or what to do in a fire emergency, so we'll take that as read. Have we got any apologies, Adam?
Apologies for Councillor Solpenholt, Chair.
Okay. Any substitutes? Okay. Any public questions and statements?
No public questions, Chair.
Okay. The minutes, we have the revised minutes from the 28th of January and the minutes from the 11th of February. Does anyone have any comments on them? Or can we approve them? Yeah, everyone content that they're factual and correct? Yes? Okay, would someone like to propose them? Lovely, thank you very much. And second, and yeah, okay, and then is everyone in favour? Yeah, lovely, thanks very much. Okay, any items of urgent business? No. Any declarations of interest?
Sorry, Chair. I think that was the January minutes. Have we done the February minutes as
Can't
well?
we do them together?
Generally, I would sort of propose and second both individually, really. If that's
Okay, okay, so we take that as the proposal for the January.
Yep.
Okay, would someone like to propose the it's an exercise, isn't it? And then second them, lovely, and all in favour of the February minutes. Yep, lovely. Thank you for that correction. Thanks for that. Okay, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest today? No? And no, I don't think we have a petition, do we, Adam?
No petitions, Chair.
And I don't think we have any matters referred to us, is that correct?
None received, no, Chair.
And we don't have any, do we have any responses?
No, nothing
Item
received,
9?
Chair. No.
Phew. Item 10, budget monitoring. Okay. So do we have anyone to present this, or should we go straight into our discussion?
I don't know if Officer King wants to present the budget monitoring or
do you just want to ask questions, Mr. King?
I'm happy to present,
Oh, thank you.
and Officer King will support any questions.
Lovely, thank you.
So I pop up there.
Yeah, I think we have someone coming. Lovely. Okay. Morning. We're just about to discuss item 10, so you're very much on the money. Your computer might not be ready, that's the only thing. It might be updating itself.
Always updating.
Lovely.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So the period 10 budget monitoring report, I'm very aware that it's not been long since we've set the budget, and it won't feel long since we've last seen period 6. So at period 6, we reported that we were anticipating a surplus, which you can still see is the case. The additional thing that's in here that wasn't in the previous budget monitoring report relates to the extended responsibility producer grant, which, if you remember, in previous meetings, you would have seen that it's sat in the reserves. The extended responsibility producer grant is intended to be spent on the services that deal with the product packaging that comes from the consumer, and we then have to go and recycle. So what we're doing in this paper is we're going to release the extended responsibility producer grant to cover the service costs, which will then leave the 1.3 free from the budget, which we were putting in a reserve, in the general fund, to then be able to offset the anticipated cost of food waste. So that's the only main difference in this paper.
Okay. That it? Yeah. Oh. Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions? Pushing?
I may as well kick off. There's quite a few questions, but one, if I may, page 39 of our written report, which talks on section 4.2. It states there that there was a shortfall of 420,000 in terms of anticipated savings, which is the current picture, which gives rise to a number of questions. So what will be the impact of those? Will they be made up in future? But probably the more pressing concern is that I note for the next financial year, you have not actually gone out to specify any specific savings, saying this is now embedded in what everyone else does. Or if it's embedded and there's a shortfall last year, that are you concerned that that strategy will not bear fruit?
Fantastic question. So if you look on page 71 of the agenda pack, you will see the budget monitoring savings and incomes paper. That is something that I requested that the committee helped me monitor throughout the budget monitoring process, and I've been extremely grateful for that. So you can see outlined in there where the difference is. I've always said that I wanted to be as transparent as possible and for all of us to work together in monitoring our financial position. I have no concerns currently, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be sat here today with what overall is quite a good news story. The only concerns that we have is what we don't know is coming. So as we know, we had the change with the food waste coming. We'd anticipated that we had hoped that the government would understand the full and true costs to the taxpayer of that. We've learned since then that they don't. So the only thing that I have concerns about is what's coming down the track that will be a surprise to us, and what is coming down the track that we won't anticipate the government may fund correctly. Does that make sense?
Did you have a further question? Oh, no, I'll come back to you later. Councillor Hankins? Mike, could you put your microphone on? Because people at home would be able to hear you. Thank you very much.
So, on page 42, paragraph D, what is the explanation for the underspend of 1,312,800 in respect of recycling revenue?
Okay, so it's not strictly an underspend. So when we set the revenue budget for 25-26, we had included in there the costs for the full service. When we received the grant, there was some ambiguity about the purpose of it. We know that the grant figure changed in year. The government reduced the grant figure. So there were still things that we didn't know about the grant. So where we had budgeted for the cost of that service, that grant is designed to fund part of the service. So it's not an underspend as such. The money has been spent on the service. We're just in a really beneficial position that where we've got the up and coming food waste collections, which we know the cost will fall on to the taxpayer, we know that we can now budget for the future of that cost with the prudence that we had in the 25-26 budget, where we set the revenue budget for the waste collection service.
Okay, so but the grant was for what?
So it's my understanding, officers can correct me, so it is a levy on the producers and manufacturers of food packaging. So where we have recycling, and we put all our recycling in, and it's collected and taken away, the cost of that doesn't fall completely on the taxpayer. The manufacturers involved in collecting recycling waste pay a levy to contribute cost of recycling.
So what has changed?
Say that again, sorry.
What has changed?
Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Well, okay, I understand the definition of underspend, right? So there was a grant to enable the collection of taxes, if you like, for packaging. It's packaging, okay? That is not happening, or is it being delayed, or what?
So my understanding is the government wants to reduce the amount of packaging in the supply chain. And to do that, they've applied a levy on producers of packaging. They've collected that levy and divided it up amongst the local authorities, the
Okay.
collection and disposal authorities. Part of the reason that the award to North Norfolk District Council is they decide to change the formula and give more money to the urban centres. So again, rural districts were disadvantaged in the recalculation of the formula. The idea, as my understanding goes, is that by applying a levy directly on the producers of this material, they will find ways of creating less material. So we have the grant for 25-26. We have also been advised of a similar level of grant for 26-27 of about 1.3 million. But if the government achieves its objectives in future, then we would see that grant go down because there'll be less packaging in the supply chain. So when we're doing the budget planning in December and January of 2025, or December 24, January 25, we'd lacked clarity on how we could spend the money that we'd been promised.
Right.
At the time, it was 1.6 million, so quite a large drop in year. So because of taking a prudent approach, we put that money into an earmarked reserve until we had sufficient clarity. And also that we had established that we'd incurred appropriate costs to offset the grant against. We've now obtained that clarity and released that provision in year. We can't hold on to that money forever for a rainy day. It's to offset the costs incurred in year of collecting and disposing of recycled materials.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
I had a discussion about, quite a few of the economies are based on loss of contaminant of staff replacement for individual offences. Question arises to whether this actually encourages efficiencies or perhaps the opposite.
So there's 2 points that you're raising there. One is the time that we hold a vacancy open. We hold a vacancy, sorry. And the other one is our investment in apprenticeships. So there are 2 parts there. So the holding vacancies occurs where we understand we have capacity to do so for a smaller extension of time. Where we know that we can't because there are capacity issues in teams, recruitment is almost immediate. But what we have to take into consideration is if somebody leaves the organisation, they have a period of notice. When we recruit somebody to the organisation, they will have a period of notice with their employer too. So some of these things are out of our control, but are beneficial overall to the budget position. The investment in apprenticeships is something that this council is particularly proud of. The public sector is often overlooked in many ways, and we know historically, if we think about the time that we had where our finance teams had some gaps in staffing, we're not in that position now, but that is reflective of where people choose to have careers. And when you look at the competitive salaries that you get in the private sector, for example, that often disadvantages a council like ours, which is in a beautiful setting, which is very, very community and family orientated. We are disadvantaged then by not being able to offer the same salaries. So the apprenticeship route is fantastic for us because it enables people a route into local government. It enables people into possibly jobs that they may not have thought about having. And when you think about the wide range of services that we offer here, it's very difficult at a younger age to envisage that you could step foot into any of them. I know our leader had some quite fantastic tours learning about all kinds of things that the council does. And that's been a journey that we've all been on. So when you realise quite what we can offer here for employment and skills, we need to make sure that we're opening the door to people to do that.
Good, thank you very much indeed.
Councillor Baines?
Sorry, can I follow up on that question regarding apprenticeships? Might not be a question you've got now or an answer you've got now, but how many apprenticeships do we actually employ? And the other question to that is, do we maximise our levy?
I don't have the exact figures, but we can get back to you on that, of course.
I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Cushing?
Thank you. Last week, it was announced that NNDC was going to pull out of the Connect building in Fakenham and remove the 2 staff there. I don't have an issue. That's an operational decision, so that's up to the SLT to do that. The comms to members might have been better, but hey ho. What sort of raised my eyebrows about that was Councillor Vickers, my colleague, wrote to the chief executive about that, and the response she got was that this proposed saving had previously been outlined by the corporate leadership team and understood had then moved forward, formed part of the recent budget process. Did I miss something? Because I don't recall you ever mentioning that, and I can't find it in the papers anywhere. So I wonder if you have any shed some light on that, please.
No, absolutely. Obviously, that is an operational decision. I myself double and triple checked the budget papers to make sure that I hadn't not brought that to anybody's attention, because we've worked incredibly well together across the council, and I wouldn't want anybody to think that there wasn't transparency there completely, but that is an operational decision. So colleagues to my right may be able to add some more information about that.
We don't have any specific comments about it, except in terms of operational footprint, the levels of demand were very low. And it was felt it wasn't delivering excuse me, value for money, stationing an officer there, and also the risks around lone working, because we tended to only have a single officer there. In terms of staffing levels, that may or may not have been included within the budget papers in terms of the customer services budgets for 2026-27. My understanding, it isn't necessarily the same officer that's stationed there. So it wasn't obvious that one person was leaving the council. It was more to do with a rotation.
I don't have an issue with the decision. That's an operational decision. So it's not that wasn't my challenge. My challenge was that the response to all members from the chief executive is that effectively we all missed something, and it was there before. That I don't think was the case. So I think perhaps we need to go back to the chief executive on that particular point.
For absolute transparency, it was not noted in the budget setting process specifically, and that was a question that I had asked, because a service change like that is something that I would have discussed ahead of the budget setting process. I wouldn't have. No, I know you don't, Councillor Cushing, because we've got a really good relationship when it comes to transparency and openness about that. So it was something that I learned after the fact.
Councillor Withington, perhaps you could shed some light.
Yes, it wouldn't have been specifically put in the budget, as Councillor Shires has said, because it was being brought forward as a potential saving. So obviously until the point when it was agreed that that would be a sensible approach to take, and it was possible, because obviously it was a largely HR issue in terms of what was happening with staff and fixed term contracts coming to an end, etc. So that it's, you know, it's got to that stage just recently really, which is post where we've been with budget setting. But it obviously has come forward as a significant saving in terms of costs to customer service. However, just for members' information at this point, while I've got the microphone, in terms, I would agree with the comments that were made about the service level that has been used there. It's predominantly the DWP who are also in that office, and we have in effect been serving as a receptionist for the DWP, which obviously is not an efficient use of our services. And we've been dealing with around 10 to 15 maximum on a day customers, over 50% of which are DWP. Whereas if we have a CSA working not based in Fakenham, then they are dealing with at least 30 customers and clients a day and dealing with far more serious issues sometimes as well. So it was very much a sensible decision, I feel. I think there are some issues in terms of how it has been managed, and I think that's been referred to, and Councillor Vickers has had a letter about that as well.
As I say, I don't have a quibble with
Yeah.
the decision.
I just
That's
wanted
not
to
a
let
rational decision
members
to make.
know.
And I'm sure there's good reasons for it, but I do have an issue with the response that Councillor Vickers received, which I don't think was urgent as it might have been. So,
Councillor Fletcher.
This is a question of query, which I would on page 57. On the paragraph, the text. There's what the saying about £40,000. There are killing costs associated with the enforcement case, another client's understanding the service. I'm sorry.
I think just
Sorry,
my-
Mike, just.
No. It's not my portfolio area, but I think that's a really, really valid question. If you wouldn't mind, I can ask the portfolio holder.
Yeah,
or
sure.
Office
Yes, it
representative.
just it looks very frightening. I don't.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher.
Councillor Cushing again.
thank you. If I may, I turn to the capital programme. If we go to 5.2, it states there that we have a full year budget of 38.5 million, of which at the moment we've got 29.5 million unspent. If you look at the forecast tables, what the capital programme doesn't do is it doesn't split the spend into the years where you anticipate that they would be, say, for the large capital programmes like Flash, for example, you've got £11 million spend in the current financial year. Well, we know for a fact that a lot of that spend is going to be post-April in the new financial year. So why doesn't the forecast, where you are able to do so, split the forecast into the appropriate years? That means that we wouldn't look like we've got a huge underspend. The other point I make is one which I've made before, is that when we're looking at the capital programme, I do think it would be an awful lot far more helpful if we split it in between the money that is granted from central government and the money that is funded by NNDC by one means or another, because most of the capital programme's expenditure or funding does actually come from central government. You look at the coastwide scheme, you've got Flash and probably one or two others in there, and that might help give us a more focus on probably the areas where we might have some influence, which is the capital programme that NNDC funds.
Okay, so there's 2 points there. At the bottom of the capital programme, we do have the split, but are you suggesting a split line by line rather than an overall split? Okay, and then the other point is when we, just so that I completely understand, obviously it would be incredibly amazing if we could get everything done in 1 year. I think we would be a very, very busy team overall if we achieved everything, and I think it would be the fastest swimming pool build nationally. So is the request, just so I completely understand, so when we set the budget, we set what we intend to spend in year what we intend to spend the following year. So if we look at, for example, the coastal defences line, which is the fourth one up from page 63, we budget what the capital request is going to be year on year, not what the work that's going to be undertaken year on year. So where money gets moved over, we have that process. We do that collectively, if you remember. I want to say that comes in the outturn, where we then look at where projects that weren't completed in year and the carrying over of monies. So that's part of our process. So this is an individual programme of works that we have requested the money for in year.
But that's fine. So if you look at the coastline, but that's an example probably how it should be done. But if you look at the other parts of the table, so you go on to page 64, halfway down, you've got the Fakenham Leisure and Sports Hub, 11.6 million. But there's no forecast spend in the next budget year when we know for a fact that there will be, because they haven't actually built it yet. So they're not going to start building it until the summer. So obviously those costs are going to come in the next financial year, and they will have detailed financial forecast of how that 11 million pounds is going to be spent. So that's one example where you could do. And we also have an awful lot of other ones down there, which is we haven't even started spending money yet. So presumably there's no, do we know when we're going to spend it, and can we actually then forecast it? If it's going to be this year, then the following year. But that comes back to the point I made in the budget debate, that actually you should have this programme could do with a good thorough prioritisation and thinning out.
Yes. So if I understand correctly, so when we request the money at the start of the year, as we've just done in the budget, what I feel like you're saying, so correct me if I'm wrong, is where we know we're not going to spend that whole money in year, we should then be looking at how we're going to move money into following years to do the project. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll let officers respond on that. In terms of the ambition of the capital programme, yes, I completely agree with you. We've had conversations about this previously, especially when we set the budget last. There is a lot of stuff in here. We are an ambitious council. We've become slightly more ambitious with the capital programme that we set at the budget. Prioritisation does happen, and I do meet with officers regularly to ensure that it doesn't sit as a budget line, that the money is actually going to be spent. And if it's not going to be spent, then we need to revisit why and potentially repurpose the money. So I will let officers respond on the separating across budget years.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's clear that a large complex project like the Flash may not all fit within one calendar year. I think we also have to reflect that this capital programme would have been devised in December 24, and it may well have been based on, perhaps optimistically, that it would be delivered within all of 25-26, or that the cash flow around that project had not yet been determined because it hadn't been tendered yet. So it could well be that it was left as simple as possible, so not creating a misleading expectation. Also, for prudence, where we have borrowing, we need to be, and any large grant funded programme, we need to be clear on what our maximum exposure is in terms of cash flow as a council as a whole. So it's better to include all of the potential outflows within year, rather than creating an artificial split that we're not confident on, and then that creates a crunch in terms of our working capital and a need to borrow. So it helps with cash flow monitoring. I do appreciate knowing what we know now, 14 months later, it does appear a little bit naive, but I think that was probably trying to keep it as simple as possible. In terms of your other question, if I may address that one as well, in terms of the funding source, it may be possible to add a column to this report going forward, which has a simple code of where the money's coming from. However, if we include all the splits, so there may be match funding, there may be a bit of borrowing, a bit of grant, a bit of capital receipt in certain projects, it becomes very complex. as well, and unwieldy and difficult to decipher. So we could look at adding a column which says which ones are borrowing, which ones are grant, which ones are capital receipts. But if we get into the detail of the proportions, then this becomes a very large and hard to read document.
So if I may, yeah, that's a point well made. I was just trying to make it constructive as one of the mere mortals who are trying to decipher all this information and understand it. I just say from my point of view, I think it'd be helpful to understand what comes from central government and what doesn't. And as Councillor Shires rightly says, that table is at the bottom, but it's a really sort of, yeah.
I think it's something that we could do once per year, probably, to include that in the report. We know we often have too much information. So if we did it once, so there'd be one copy, so everybody would have a key knowledge of where it came from. And then obviously as grants come in, if there is an update that comes through the budget monitoring process anyway, or it's a paper. So if we had that once, would that be better rather than it coming at every time you looked at the budget?
Yes. No, that's fine. That comes at the point when we've just been through the annual budget cycle, as we know. And if I look down the bottom, I haven't looked at the figures recently, but 24 million, nearly 25 million of our programme comes from central government grants, which do some very quick maths. It means that about 14 million is within NNDC's gift to prioritise. But it's really that 14 million that we want to focus on, because we don't want to do anything muck around with what comes from central government, and we want to make sure that is spent. That's probably the only thing we have there. Sorry, it's really arcane, but I've done that.
So I think it would be beneficial for a paper to come potentially when we do the outturn. I'm looking at okay, fantastic. So when we do the outturn, if we bring an additional paper, just that you know, in the next year's capital programme, I think would be better rather than looking historically where the money's coming from. I think we only need that information once, because that's very unlikely to change. Yeah. Okay.
Do we need to make that a formal recommendation, or do you just take that away and do it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Councillor Hankins.
Thank you, Chair. On page 65, there's an item, Housing 106 Enabling Fund. Firstly, what is being enabled in housing? How does that work? And the second part of the question is, last year, I recall there were some comments in the planning meeting about the management of the ISO funding. And we were assured that improvements were going to be made in order to know where the money was and where it was going. So first point is, could you answer what is being enabled by that particular amount of money? Secondly, how is it being managed now?
Okay, that's an amazing question. I think that's really important, particularly when we've done the work that we've done with social housing and meeting our housing need and demands for temporary accommodation. I'm going to hand over to Officer King, who's adjusted his jacket, which means it's the right person, to give you some more information on that.
Excuse me. So the housing section 106 enabling monies, that's for affordable homes. Grant money is paid over to developers to enable affordable homes to be built, is my understanding of what that capital line is used for there. Regarding more widely in terms of section 106, we had a number of internal audit recommendations with surrounding section 106. I had a catch up with the assistant director this morning in terms of how that's going, and I understand that there's a permanent staff member in place now since January, and they have a programme of works to close out those recommendations. I believe some have already been actioned and there's sort of results, and I think the rest are sort of programmed in to sort of achieve those. I was reassured as well that in terms of any potential clawback of money is that's being monitored, so that shouldn't happen. So we should sort of confident we are using that money in the right timeframes.
Yeah.
So can we be updated through this committee on the progress?
Yeah, I can update.
Thank you.
Everyone happy? Okay, I had a couple of questions. It says that there's a shortfall in rent from the chalet, beach huts and chalets, of 42,000. And on the action plan, it says there's a surplus of, an additional 30,000 coming in, if you look on the action plan. So which is it?
Where are?
It's on page 37,
Yeah.
3.9. It's under rent shortfall. 42,000 for rent shortfall in beach huts and chalets as a result of the reorganisation, which we all voted for.
Yes.
And then on page 97 was a paper version in the action plan. It says we have a projected. We will get another 30,000 of income. So is there a timing issue here or?
No, so what you're seeing there is obviously we did make the decision to go to long leases because it was more efficient. But in line with that change, which would have seen a drop in income, we are reviewing the leases as well. So there will be a rent increase on the leases. So they're two parts of the same thing. So we needed to acknowledge that there would be a change on income in that way, because we wanted to make sure that it was aware that when we made that decision, we were going to see a drop, even though it increased efficiency. But through commercialisation, the team are reviewing all leases, which will generate more income to bridge the gap.
Okay, so it's the 12,000
Yeah.
rent shortfall. Okay. Bottom of page 38, we've got a public works loan, but public works board loan of 5 million. And we had one that cost us 210,000, and then we had another one that cost us 23,000, and the interest rate didn't seem to be that different. I wondered how that worked. So in the 3.16, it says we had a borrowing expense of 210,000 in 25-26 at a rate of 4.59, and in 3.17 it says we had a 23,000 borrowing expense, 25-26, at 5.39. So why would it be so different?
So the reason for this is in 3.16, that loan, the period of that loan was that loan existed for the entirety of our financial year.
Yeah.
So we were paying interest over the whole year. Whereas in 3.17,
Brilliant.
that was a loan that existed for, I think it was less than a month into our current year.
Lovely.
So that's
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And the season ticket car parking permits shortfall, as it were. Why do you think that's happened? Is on page 37. Under customer and client receipts. Have I got the, am I interpreting correctly? I think it says somewhere else that the season ticket income is down. So I've got my brackets wrong, which is possible.
We will look into the underlying data on that. I think
you?
that's beneficial because as a committee, you've been really supportive when we've analysed car parking fees and charges. So I think as a follow-up to that, I think it would be beneficial overall for us to look at that.
Well, maybe the other thing that worried me slightly was that you can no longer buy them by phone. So because of some new financial regulations. And I know that somebody had trouble with that, and I can imagine some residents would, as they can't use the internet. So I just wondered if that had impacted at all. That you could possibly could report back on.
Yeah, of course, we'll have a look into that. We'll have a look into that. I think that could possibly be to do with handing over card data over the phone.
Yes, it's been explained to me, Rose, and it makes sense, but it's just
I think that's
difficult for
beneficial.
people because they've now got to get the bus to Roma.
I think that's a really good point for us to investigate. We'll absolutely do that.
Okay. Good. How's the base?
Yeah, page 45. It's just curiosity more than anything, but reprographics employee 709. Is that just one member of staff? Over? Is it a fractional staff? I always see someone in there, but compared to all the others, it's quite.
That member of staff is extremely good value.
It is.
I believe, it's my understanding, if you compare it to, somebody may correct me if I'm wrong, if you compare it to the budget we've just set, I believe that member of staff was covered under the customer services budget, and we've tidied that up a little bit. I'm correct, okay. And we've tidied that up a little bit and moved the cost for that service over to reprographics.
Yep.
So you will see that in the 26-27 budget that we set. Great question though. It's fantastic to highlight that team. That staff member is often very quietly, busily working away.
I only have one other question. That's going back to the colleague Councillor Cushion. Collector's cabin roof, for example, does it mean half the roof has been done, the other half is waiting to be done, or because it says we've spent half of it roughly? I know I'm just picking out just one thing. I think when you do a cabin roof, you'd expect it all to be done at one time, but I don't know.
So if you remember when I brought that paper, we had asked for an amount at which we believe would be the highest we would possibly go to, and quite rightly, everybody was quite uncomfortable with that amount. And we looked at different ways of re-roofing collector's cabin to make sure that we were going to achieve best value for money. We did two pieces of work. We had two roofs to thatch and achieved a cost saving in that way, but it didn't cost as much as we had anticipated, which is good news because I know everybody in the room was uncomfortable with the figure, especially with it being such a small building.
Okay. Any further questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for that debate. So we are asked to consider the report and recommend the following on page 31, A to D, noting the contents, which I think we've done, seeking approval of full council to increase the 25-26 capital budget for disabled facilities grant to 2.3 million, to use the extended responsibility producer grant, as we have discussed, 1.3 million, and that the resulting underspend to be transferred to the general reserve. Is everyone happy with that? Do I have a proposer for that? Yeah, and the seconder? And all in favour? Okay. Thank you very much. Super, well done. So now moving on to item 11, which is the action plan. Is that you, Tim?
Good morning, everyone. Just to be aware, I'm only here until 25 to, so we've got 2 items to go. So we'll have to be quite quick with me, sorry.
Well, we're up for that then.
But jumping straight into it, apologies, first of all, for the incorrect plan that was sent to you. So obviously that was originally, it has been updated, and just to sort of have a quick run through, obviously in terms of item 1, that was one of them that was the incorrect narrative was attached there, and as you're aware, that the local plan has now been approved. There is still the possibility of challenge from developers on sites that didn't get allocated, and there's a certain time scale to go until that window is closed. And of course, we've got to begin work on the rapid review of the design guide and the work on the new local plan, with work towards the call for sites soon required. And we voiced concerns about the government expectations around the scale and achievability of house building targets at the cabinet meeting. The second item, obviously, you continue to be aware of the difficulties we face here, given the needs to address the housing crisis, and our property portfolio obviously increases with additional temporary housing, and so therefore does our carbon footprint. But we're still undertaking significant interventions, most significant of which currently is alongside the construction of the Fakenham swimming pool and leisure centre well underway. And in terms of item 3, as Lucy has already mentioned, we're still seeking clarity and funding from government in respect to food waste collections. As you're aware, everyone is after the same equipment and material at the same time, really. don't think there's anything following that. I know there was a question at cabinet meeting on item 8, wasn't there, about the contractor? I think did you get a reply to that,
No.
councillor Holiday? Did you not?
Yeah.
Okay, I will chase that for
Thank
you.
for that.
Item 9, I'm increasingly hopeful that we will see some announcements about improvements and extensions to healthcare services, which will benefit North Norfolk residents perhaps over the next 6 months. There are certainly reviews ongoing into the quality and effectiveness of hospital discharges, and consideration around the future of Benjamin Court is also ongoing. We also have the new dental practice opening shortly in Cromer, but we are meeting social care representatives to discuss the future of the Norse Care facilities across the district, which the county council announced the disposal of. And item 10, obviously, as I've said, already significant progress being made towards the Fakenham swimming pool, and we'll continue posting updates on that on social media, etc. Item 12, I think this is another one that was erroneously misrepresented in the initially distributed paper. Whole Country Park, this is an area, maybe it's certainly green. We're exceeding the expectations here, frankly, in terms of the number and scale of improvements. Moving on to 14, yeah, we've exceeded expectations here in terms of a successful collection, which has, of course, benefited other recipient authorities too. And moving down to item 16, that is now completed, and we're exceeding on the target, and certainly good practice ahead of the legislative changes arising from the Renters' Rights Act. Following item 17, I think the incorrect narrative was used there as well. So yeah, as we've said there, very low proportion of our housing stock is long-term empty. The empty homes premium is being successfully applied, and actually we get good feedback from the owners of empty homes, as you might have seen in a recent video that we posted, raising the sort of help that we give those property owners. Lots of, diversity of different issues. Item 18, really significant work in this space in recent weeks alongside partners and counterparts, which I know has been very valued by our businesses. And it's been really, really good to see the real rich diversity of businesses being celebrated as well. Moving on down to 21. We've been exceeding our expectations here. Of course, I think we're possibly the first district to have seen as many as 3 such facilities open. And there's, I think, North Walsham is this Friday, isn't it? Which is really good. And we're having tentative conversations about our other towns, but of course they are much smaller. But we'll continue to pursue that in addition to conversations we're having about the possibility of a cash machine at Fakenham. Want to try and pursue something similar at Holt as well, conscious they've only got the one there. But I think, generally we need to look at, I think we're interested in diversifying our efforts to secure more cash, particularly for the small businesses. So I'm really open to ideas in the way we can do that over the next year. Moving on down to 23, in respect of UK SPF and REPFA. I've been, successful delivery of the funding again, but I've been seeking lobbying opportunities where I can, following the cliff edge of funding. The government really is completely ignorant that it's instigated following the end of these funds and the delays to the mayoral funding set to replace it. Both MPs representing North Norfolk, Broadland and Fakenham have spoken publicly about the issues, for which I'm really grateful. And finally, in respect of LGR, we don't exactly know when to expect the Minded 2 decision on which model, 1, 2 or 3. The most solid rumour I've heard is the 22nd of March. But of course, you know, others would have expected possibly a post-election announcement. Either way, I think the election possibly, it's an interesting factor in terms of where it leaves us in terms of the timescales of achieving both devolution and LGR. Enough from me.
Thank you so much. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Cushing?
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Adams. I'd like to ask a question about number 3, household waste recycling. There is a statutory requirement for that to be implemented by the 31st of March this year, but that's actually not stated in the objective. Now, I'm going to caveat my remarks by saying that I think it is a nonsense legislative requirement. I cannot for the life of me see how having lots of large lorries trundling the length and breadth of North Norfolk to pick up scraps of food waste is going to help the planet at all, but there we are. But anyway, that's legislative requirement. Therefore, we haven't achieved it. We're not going to achieve it. And really looking at the dialogue in there, we have no idea actually when we will be able to implement that. So why is that amber and not red?
So we want to achieve food waste. We're not seeking to food waste collections. We're not seeking to avoid it. You are right to point out this this barely washes its face in terms of the emissions. If you weigh the benefits of removing the food waste from the incineration versus the impact of introducing far more vehicle miles over a dispersed, you know, sparsely populated rural area. And this is a factor that the government simply does not understand. And that has been reflected in their funding or lack of this project. So we've all been in the same boat in terms of seeking the same equipment, the same lorries. And, you know, I suppose you could say, well, we possibly had the opportunity to buy cheap. I think we know what will happen. And we don't want to be doing lots of equipment breakdowns. Even the plastic polymer, in fact, for the bins has been pressured in terms of supply. So certainly big problems. As I said at an earlier point, I thought that the government should stagger the achievement of this goal over the country in a more realistic way. But as it stands now, we won't meet that. And I think it's a reasonable challenge. I think, you know, because we're still working so hard to try and achieve this, both in terms of securing the resource, but also external lobbying for the government to take a more realistic approach of the finance requirements and just the realistic requirements in terms of securing the assets and infrastructure to do it. So beyond bin lorries and the bins themselves, we've also got to think about the depot costs. I'm also slightly concerned what the nationwide picture might be in terms of the ability to secure biodigestion and when we've truly got enough capacity to actually achieve that nationwide. I don't think it's a factor for us. And there will be a diversity of different challenges that councils are facing, but there's a real issue here, a real difference in the ability of city and borough authorities to achieve this service versus one like ourselves. So I sympathise a lot with everything Councillor Cushing has just said there.
We agree in terms of where we are in terms of delivery. This what it's going to give to North Norfolk. The question I have is actually around the RAG rating, because in purest project terms, red is that you cannot be a specified deadline and you've got no plan in order to achieve that. There is a specified deadline here, whether we like it or not. Only the government can move that deadline. And I appreciate lots of other councils are in the same boat, so that it's not specific to North Norfolk. But it comes about the honesty of the ratings we've got. And I don't know whoever specified amber and liver. It is bright scarlet. It is not red even. It is that bad.
So, so an amber rating really signifies the continued ability to deliver upon the target, but perhaps not in the same way you'd originally envisaged. However, if you were to have, say, a darker shade of amber, this might well be. It's certainly one of our more significant risks. I would suggest that possibly in the next quarter, we may well be looking towards a red, but we are working, as hard as we can towards the achievement of this target but of course not in the same way. So as I say, amber is really there for when you change the way you're delivering on a target, or perhaps a changed timescale. Yeah, so that's really what that's about. But yeah, it's that goes back to the sort of categorization of those RAG ratings. But you're right to point out the risks that exist around this particular target.
Let's have one more go. I mean, if this is not read, nothing's ever going to be read on these reports. And
We've
you can
had
give
read.
yourself-
We've had read.
on very, very rare occasions.
Yeah.
And from my experience, I've often said to you in the past, a really stretching plan, you would expect to see reds. There's nothing wrong about having reds on thing. I mean, it's actually a demonstration that actually you've got a stretching and demanding plan. There is no plan in order to deliver this at the moment, other than we may get some vehicles later in the year and actually then implement it, dependent on what the government wants to do at the time. I suspect they will want to carry on doing it, but it comes back to the validity of the information we're being given, and that if you're not going through that red, it means that a lot of other things we've got on here, you think, well, actually, is that really the correct view in terms of what we're doing? And I mean, from your point of view, officers ought to be challenged on those RAG ratings. I would suggest that's my feedback.
Well, we do discuss the RAG ratings certainly, and challenge those. And I have made targets red before. I'm looking back into the last cycle, but I'm confident this is an accurate reflection at the moment. However, we review these quarterly. If that changes, and certainly, unless the government actually take a more realistic view in respect of this, we may well be looking at a red, but I don't think it's quite the time to do that yet. Possibly, if things haven't progressed, or things have gone backwards even further in the next quarter, we may well be looking at that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bayes.
Can I just continue that sort of observation a bit further? Because my background, I don't consider this to be it's not an action plan as such. It doesn't have any smart targets in there. So you've got no timelines. I find they're very much the same. I think to me, the green gives a false sense of security. I think there's a lot of greens on the page. I read them. There's no smart targets there. There's no directed dates when you expect things to be done. I think if I was working to this, I'd be quite comfortable, because I'm not, you say you're being scrutinised, but there's no dates to say when you expect things to be done by. In my background, from where I sat at that level, I would have clear smart targets there, achievable dates when things should be done by. And I would expect, like my colleague said, red is not bad. Red is actually giving a very clear information. If you were showing this to anyone, they'd think, oh, this is great. Everything's working absolutely brilliant. But I think there's some reds I'd consider some reds in there, purely because I think there's a lot of unknowns that aren't brought into that document, that I sort of question, well, I don't know whether that is going to be achievable in that time, because there isn't enough information there. There's no set target. Smart targets are really, they have to be thought about in terms of an objective. What are you going to achieve by what time? And there should be a timeline there. There's no timeline. I think you're just leaving it open to someone who's working to that to be quite more relaxed over how they're working, I believe, from my background. I can only say that when I've used smart targets, I wouldn't have had them like that. I'd have been comfortable working to those.
I mean,
Sorry.
In terms of the action plan, this isn't a document we used to have. We could just have a corporate plan. You could look at you could scrutinise the achievements towards that. But I'm really satisfied the way this works, and it gives the cabinet and those in attendance at cabinet meetings and this scrutiny meeting the opportunity to monitor and ask questions about progress across the board. I reiterate what I've said about the amber rating being the correct one for food waste collections, because, as I've said before, it's still our intention to achieve that service improvement, that additional service. But we're not going to be able to do so in the way that we'd originally envisaged. So, we're a stable and successful authority. We've got a low turnover of staff. We're recognised by our peers as trailblazers and problem solvers. We're achieving lots of projects, and you know, the plan, the corporate plan, is the foundation of that. We're sort of not backing off from that. Others have significantly reduced the scale of their ambitions further than we have. Of course, we've taken things out because they're not realistic in the face of reorganization. But you know, if you were sitting in my position, you would be as comfortable as I am that this is the correct approach, and that actually this authority is achieving an awful lot. So as I say, I'm comfortable. There are no red or actions that deserve to be read at this time, but we continue to review that. Thank you.
I think there's two issues here, Councillor Basil, and we can talk about specifics, whether their RAG rating is correct or not, but I think the generalities that you're spraying into, we need to cover at a different time. You know, we talked about what else we would like to see in an action plan. I think Councillor Hankins has something to say on that.
Yes,
correct?
yeah, I agree. Sorry, I agree with Councillor Adam. The traffic light system is oversimplistic. I appreciate that we're not in a very difficult situation. However, I'm fortunate enough, I made a proposal to the council to adopt a slightly more focused control method I've used it quite extensively, called goal-directed project management. It's simplistic. It doesn't require lots of computer activity and so on and so forth. So in that respect, I had a meeting with the new head of, I believe he's the new head of project management, which is the project management team will work across all of the portfolios. I was impressed with the detail and the dates that he had in his plan. My concern was, and I think his concern was, is that detail, those objectives were not manifested in the traffic system. So members aren't seeing the detailed timescales, etc., that the project management team are working on. David Kingston agreed that this was the case, and agreed to go away and look at the existing reporting system and to come back with some proposals. So I think that was a move in the right direction. I mean, I have to say, I was as a project manager of some experience, I was very impressed with the grip that the project management team have got on some of these projects and the way in which they've gone about measuring it. If you can't measure it, you're not going to achieve anything. So, quite impressive. I'm encouraged that he understands this, and hopefully will come back with something that we can present and discuss. Thank you.
Yeah, it's helpful. So, Councillor Adams, when you go, is anyone going to take your place, or do we have to? Councillor Shaz, sit in for you. Would that be?
Get back to Councillor
Councillor-
Hankins then. So in terms of, you've mentioned a couple of times, members, around timescales, annual action plan, deadline for achieving that target is the start of the next financial. It's the end of that cycle. It's the end of that year. So that is your delivery deadline against those targets. Very simple.
Councillor Bailey?
Thank you. Just picking up on your banking hub comments in your intro, if I could lobby for sharing them. We've only got Nationwide, and they don't provide cash services they don't provide services for businesses. So we do have a problem there for businesses, cash exchange and cash collection and all that. And the fact that we just have one Nationwide seems to exclude us from lots of the sort of banking hub activities, but they don't, as you say, cover for businesses.
So I think we can possibly seek to try and find an enhanced deposit solution for businesses, possibly around the post office, but I don't know in terms of the structure of that. Yes, you're correct to say that unfortunately, alongside Nationwide, as it stands, and that could currently change. We can't have banking hub facilities. I know Nationwide are considering their ability to try and service business customers as well. And just to say, in terms of Fakenham and Sheringham, they report that both branches are doing very well. Certainly they are, intending to stay for the long term. But yeah, that doesn't change the fact we do need to look everywhere in terms of what improvements are needed.
Thank you. Councillor Rice?
Yeah, I'd just like to, I think it's really good that Holt is being considered for a second cash point. The one we have now outside Budgeons, it regularly runs out of money, and when the banking hub isn't open or the post office isn't open or anywhere else you can get cash, it is frustrating for my constituents that they can't get cash when they need it. Would you be able to provide an update as to how far along those discussions are?
They've not even started yet. Frankly, Councillor Rouse, it's a sort of observation really I've made in the last few weeks whilst spending a little bit of time dealing with Fakenham and a provider there. And we've given some planning advice, etc. To try and to bring that along. Of course, it doesn't predetermine any outcomes in terms of the planning system, but I'm able to support those discussions alongside the planning team, alongside the portfolio holder for economic growth in terms of achieving some of these outcomes. So I want to do the same in Holt, recognising that currently the existing cash machine facility, which is one, of course, possibly isn't meeting the needs of the town. Where that could be, is obviously, not something we can determine yet. But if we can find a location, we'll be willing to give some planning advice, etc.
I know that Cromer Banking Hub has a cash machine, and the one in Holt does not. At the same time, I don't want to lobby for a cash machine that's potentially going to take away jobs from those working within the banking hub itself. But I do see the need for Holt to have a second cash machine, so it's something that I think we need to be considered about. And I'd happily attend any meetings with Cash Access UK with yourself to move those discussions further onward.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Well, as in this case, we are dependent on external agencies delivering and wanting to work with us, but we will do the best we can to assist them.
I had a question. Oh, sorry. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at section 9 on health and care facilities, it seems a little opaque as to exactly what progress is being made. You'll be aware that we have significant housing development in the market towns, North Walsham in particular, and that the existing facilities are bluntly inadequate. They do not cope with the demand. Yet we're not seeing any information coming out from the health authority or other that says, there are clear plans to improve the situation in terms of provision of health centres, for example. I know there's things going on in the background, but to the ordinary resident of these towns, they all they see is an increasingly poor service. They don't see what's going to happen when, another 1,800 houses are built, for example.
So certainly we've discussed North Walsham specifically with NHS bosses in terms of very dispersed nature of primary provision in North Walsham as it stands. I think, you're right to say there's lots of discussions in the background, as you put it. But I'm increasingly confident we're going to see some announcements that are, do signify beneficial new services to our residents. I think they're in that process of reviewing their ability to achieve that, certain services, what the needs are, and they're working alongside social care authority to do so as well, in terms of reviewing the quality of some of these services and the outcomes, etc. So I think it's going to take some some time. But yeah, we're getting there on a few fronts, I think, at the moment. And we'll obviously, I think that approach though, in terms of just keeping that pressure up, keep making those sort of observations is helpful in this space. Because I think we do need to continue pressure to improve these services at every point in time.
Councillor Withington, would you want to come in on that?
Hello, I thought it might be helpful to come in on this as chair of the Health and Wellbeing Partnership. This is, as Councillor Adams has said, being discussed in the background. It is actually now, I think there's been very different approach to that taken with Ed Garrett now leading on the ICB. That has changed the conversations quite significantly. And whereas Norfolk has been quite significantly behind the rest of the country in developing the integrated neighbourhood teams, which put the focus back on those local community services such as Benjamin Court, we have been very slow in moving that forward. They are now looking at that and hoping to move those conversations forward at much greater speed. And I think that will highlight then the very good assets that we've got in the community that need to be retained as part of that model and potentially even brought back. So I think it could be, we could end up with a much more community focused model. And I'm pleased to see that that is coming forward at the moment.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Hines?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. I had a question about the rural position statement, which is obviously very important. And but we had an update on our action tracker, which said, it's page 122. That says actually it's there's little resource to progress it, and you may need to seek outside support to put together. No deadline. So I wondered if, I hate to ask this, but whether Amber was the correct grading for that, because it sounds as if it's a little bit more in retard than perhaps this would suggest.
Well, yeah, it certainly has been pressured there. We're still intending to deliver a rural position statement ahead of local government reorganisation to set the scene and identify the issues, the challenges, but also the opportunities. And there's a huge number of opportunities in terms of business growth opportunities across our district, which can fit very well into a new local authority area. However, we have essentially lacked the resource in terms of data exploitation due to an ongoing long-term absence, unfortunately. Yeah, it just simply hasn't been in our control. So we are working on that at the moment, and there has been some other work surrounding this in terms of scoping and shaping what this may look like in the meantime. But yes, it has been delayed. But yeah, I'm still confident we will achieve the target. So
Okay.
it's not in terms of yeah, as I say, you might want to have a discussion committee around what those RAG ratings mean. Because red is we're probably not going to deliver here at all. Yeah, in terms of your comfort that they are an accurate reflection, but certainly satisfied that is an Amber.
Okay, I think my question was that the more recent report from, I think it might have been from Councillor Toy, was more negative than that, and perhaps it wasn't going to be achieved, but take the one through. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Toy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just yeah, it is a real challenge to deliver it, but we are driving that through a different direction as well as we move to continuing with the market town. Excuse me, swallowed wrong. Continuing with the market town work, we're actually going to include the villages and the hinterland, which will start to bring in some of that data that we need towards the to the final project. So we are working on it. It will be done, but it is a real challenge. Thank you.
Okay, that's reassuring. Any other questions about the action plan for this year? No? Is everyone happy? Okay, I think we are to note it, I think. Note contents and provide comments. I think we've satisfactorily done that. Okay, so for the corporate plan for 26-20, annual action plan for 26-27, Are you staying for that, Tim? or-
I will introduce them right away.
Okay,
If you can deal with any
Lucy's
questions.
very
I've got
kindly.
a fascinating meeting coming up with the Royal Navy, which I'm very keen to get
Don't want
to.
to miss that.
In terms of this report, this is obviously the action plan for following year from April, and I do wish to thank corporate leadership team and executive support officers for bringing this paper together following the discussions of the cabinet, whom I'm also grateful to for their thoughts and observations and challenge. This plan clearly reflects the current context and frankly some of the contradictory instruction from government over business as usual and full reorganisation. The two don't really coincide very well in terms of trying to do business as usual and a full reorganisation of local government. There certainly would have been additional items on this list were it not for this focus on reorganisation, as we've said before, and that will impact, I think, the development of public services everywhere nationwide where this is a factor. However, unlike many councils, we are still intending on carrying out numerous projects, and of course, this is reflected in the capital budget planning as well. So as a brief tour, the first section, this is reflects the new expectation around local plan development. This isn't, I should stress, an endorsement of the government strategy on house building targets, which I don't think anyone thinks are at all particularly realistic. But in this instance, the law is the law. Item 2, a continuation as you would expect. Item 3, as I said before, we're attempting to squeeze government to be more realistic about the waste collections. In addition, in the settlement pot distributed to sparse and rural authorities. Item 4 is obviously continuation. The government has recognised the value of our work here and renewed funding as previously reported, which is real credit to the team there. And item 5, this is specific to assets with biodiversity value and are willing to transfer those assets or at least custodianship of those to local groups to carry out maintenance and improvements. Second section, item 1 is continuation. As we were talking about before, not been possible to realise that goal due to some staff resourcing at the moment. Item 2, we've decided to continue promotion labour plans despite government abandonment of this, given we have a few in the pipeline and recognise the value of community-led planning. And items 3 to 7, all amended continuation, recognising changes and progress in those areas. Item 8 is obviously a reflection of a new capital project, which Lucy and I will, Councillor Shires and I will progress shortly in terms of play equipment. And item 9 also reflects a new budget line discussed at full council too. And item 10, very exciting, lays the groundwork for a major future project in Sheringham, of course, not again preempting the planning service. So the third section is obviously meeting housing needs, all retained actions that have been updated in respect of details of where and how affordable home, where those locations are, etc. And of course changes to legislation which we previously discussed around the Renters' Right Act. The following section is investing in our local economy and infrastructure, and these are all again retained and continued actions reflecting particularly, I think, on the strong engagement that we've been able to see with businesses, and for which we're seeing some really good feedback. And we want to obviously continue to grow that really good working relationship with the county council in this respect as well. And the last section, the strong, responsible and accountable council. Again, amended continuation here, perhaps less changes than throughout the the other parts of the action plan, but recognising really this is the area within the action plan that's the strong foundation of the corporate plan, and this is the solid governance that gets us through. So this is obviously this will take us through the course of the next year, and that will be reflected in the annual action plan reports, the quarterly reports that you get at this committee on a quarterly basis. Great to run that thing.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions? No? No questions? Lucy's walked all the way up to the front. You haven't got any questions for her? Well, I was wondering, given that we're at the beginning of the process, whether it's possible to get any sort of more targets in, to quantify a little bit more so that we would be able to note our progress a bit more clearly.
So I think
For
if I
example,
can,
I will give you a list of ones that I thought were applicable, but I just think it's something that's always raised when we go through the action plan, and as we're starting afresh, whether there's a chance to put anything like any more
so if I
targets in.
if I take everybody back to why we have an action plan in the first place, because I think that's been lost a little bit in this process. Many of you, some of you weren't elected at the time because you joined partway through the term. At the start of this term in 2023, councillors were invited to come and sit with cabinet and officers to have input into our corporate plan. And that corporate plan was agreed in 2023. Now, this council has added an extra layer of transparency to that. The way the corporate plan is then turned into an action plan on an annual basis had never been done in the way that it was done. So it's not just about the KPIs in year, it's about how we're actually going to deliver on manifesto promises. So that's what the plan was intended to do. We used to have one big corporate plan in the previous term, and that corporate plan saw us throughout. But we wanted to make sure that we were communicating when we're making budget decisions. For example, you'll note in the capital programme, all the capital is under the set headings and things like that. So it was an extra layer of us talking about the manifesto promises that we made as an administration and how we're going to deliver on that year on year. So I don't want that to be lost at all, because we did performance management in a different way, which was more targeted, which was about customer service responses and things like that, which was all heavily KPI'd and targeted. That was not found to be helpful because there was a lot of conversation around that. So whatever the conversation points has got to be, we're flip-flopping in and out of what is necessary. I think where Councillor Adams raised a really valid point, actually, is that when we look at the RAG rating, I think we need a shared understanding of what that represents. So potentially, before we look at doing anything else, we need to get that basis completely in, because it's fine us talking about a RAG rating if your understanding of what that actually represents is wrong, if that makes sense. Or wrong, I don't mean wrong, I mean different to ours. That doesn't mean you're wrong.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Christian?
Yeah, I'm going to respond to that. I wasn't going to, but I mean, for 5 years I've sat on this committee and I've made the point that when you look at objectives, they should be smart objectives. And that follows on from a 30-year-old career in the private sector, where year in, year out, I'm given objectives. I had to set objectives for large teams, which were smart. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time. So you've got specific data, so that, as Councillor Dave says, that you can actually focus on what needs to be done and when it needs to be done by. And that way, if things fall behind, you have the opportunity to have an intervention to see what you can do to help people. I turn up here at North Norfolk District Council and that doesn't apply at all. You don't worry about that. You say that. You don't. If you look at your objectives, there's very little in there that actually specific time. And I come back to the one about the refuse collection. There is a specific statutory deadline in there for the 31st of March, yet it's not in your objective to deliver it by that date. It doesn't even make any reference to that date. And you have a lot of things in there which you say are our process, they are not actions or delivery. You have things in there which are outside the gift of this council to deliver, which maybe we may want to see, like banking hubs, very important, lobbying the NHS, but you don't have to have that in your objectives in order to do all of that sort of stuff. But therefore, by the fact you're doing it, you just make it green. It just gives the impression that objectives should be, if you like, a horse race. You should have it's setting the hurdles 1 foot high, jumping over them and saying, haven't we done well? And actually, the hurdle should be higher than that, more demanding. And they should be more demanding for officers in order to achieve. So that's why at the time you sit there, well, what's the point? I've been saying it, been saying this for a long, long while now. It never gets anywhere. And it's there are reasons why areas have smart objectives. So
I think it's a little bit unfortunate because Councillor Hankin gave a really good update previously as to the level of information and targets that officers are working to. So to say that this council doesn't do that is improper, because Councillor Hankin, who has been a huge champion of we need more information on this, has met with officers to understand. So the report, the RAG rating of the report, is the accumulation of all the information that officers have to let us know as a council if they're on track. So please do not sit here and believe that officers do not have targets. We are consistently telling you that they do. Councillor Hankin is saying that they do. It's unfair to suggest that our officers are not working to strict targets.
I'm
going to shut this conversation down in a second, but I was very pleased to see there were some numbers in, for example, the long-term empty homes, and it really makes, and the number of affordable houses built and things like that, it really makes it so easy to get a handle on it. Has anyone got any suggestions about the actual, whether there are any actions that should be added to this, or the content of any of the actions? For example, I was thinking it'd be lovely to have a sports hub in Sheringham, but are there any other places you could have them? I was just thinking, for example, and I just wondered if we had anything more on apprentices, for example, that would be good, or anything on temporary accommodation. These are all big things for us, and I wondered if you felt these were sufficient actions to be, for which you had the capacity, or whether there was possibly to add in.
I think that's great. So there is the ever looming local government reorganisation. So we have to make sure that whatever we're saying we're going to do, we believe we can do. I think where we look at some of the work that we've done with temporary accommodation, for example, that is embedded now into our, I was going to say day to day, but we saw it in the budget setting process. So that's something that we began and we're just continuing. So these are extras above and beyond. But I think with the ambition for sports and leisure, we do have Councillor Withington in the room, who is our portfolio holder for that. We have to figure out primarily what communities want and need. I think councillors will note that the 3G pitch for North Walsham has been on there for quite some time. So it's not just about what we think is desirable, what communities think about is desirable, it's also what's deliverable through partnership. But I can hand over to Councillor Withington about sports facilities.
Yes, thank you. I agree with with what Councillor Shires has said. We have a lot of the work that we're doing is ongoing work, as you said, and that has come out of quite comprehensive surveys and studies that have been done, the outdoor spaces, the activity plans, etc., that have all been done in the last few years. So day-to-day work is ongoing anyway on those issues, and Councillor Shires has referred to the 3G at North Walsham. And sometimes with these things, it's, and Councillor Adams referred to this, and someone, councillor in this room this morning, sometimes it's beyond our control. We can desperately want something to happen, but we need somebody else to move in that sphere for us to enable it. We can do what we can. I think the Sheringham idea is an interesting one, and I very much hope as a Sheringham representative that it comes forward. But I think it's a good example for the whatever comes forward in terms of organisation of how partnership working, etc., can come together. You know, we've moved with Stalham, have moved over to a sports hub of a different type underneath the high school. So we are making those changes where the community wants it, and I think we're open to that. Fakenham is obviously being developed alongside the Splash, so there's lots of work going on in different areas as well. So, but it is much, is that what's day to day and what are we specifically focusing on to add into that now?
Okay. Anyone? Any other comments? So would you take suggestions for other places that could go forward? Or would that be surplus to requirements, as it were?
But you can always bring things forward, but again, it's going to be with LGR over the next year. What have we got the capacity to realistically bring forward? You know, I mean, we can certainly be looking at things and developing positive statements as to what we want to happen for the future. And I think that's what a lot of the work in the different portfolios is moving towards, so that there's a clear understanding for officers when they're moving forward into those shadow positions and thinking about what we want for North Norfolk as it goes in whichever direction we go in.
Okay. Thank you.
Just touching on that, and I think the portfolio reports, this is where we have information that runs on throughout, so what's happening. And I think potentially there is something that we could look to do. So if we think about when we budget monitor, we monitor the capital spend for each of our corporate plan areas. We have our action planning year, which outlines other stuff. And then as portfolio holders, you get meeting updates and activity updates of full council meetings. So potentially there's the thread that runs through all the reports that we get, that if you don't have eyes on everything, you may not be able to pull it all together. So I'm not going to speak on behalf of cabinet colleagues in the room, but potentially that's something as cabinet we could go away and think about how we can ensure that we're pulling everything together. So you get your quarterly update, you get your budget monitoring updates, and in our portfolio reports, there's other updates as in activity working towards the action plan, so that you can see what's occurring, when it's occurring, and get more timely updates than retrospective. I think that might help a little bit. And then it might help with more focused questions potentially at full council relating to action plans and budgets to try and draw everything together.
So is it Councillor Toy?
Sorry, Councillor Toy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's also difficult to capture the work that's going on. So I'm going to talk about something that I've been doing in the background, but until it becomes a thing, we can't actually bring it forward. So one of the concerns is, as we go through LGR, I look after rural parishes. I've been talking to other councillors that have rural parishes. They all have to maintain their sports equipment and their play equipment. And currently, we're kind of part of that process. Going forward, they need better support for that. So I'm talking to external organisations where there may be some sort of collective thing that they can do to do that. But until it becomes a thing and we can shape that, that kind of stuff isn't reported. So these conversations are helpful, that you're aware that we are doing more than is here. So that's why it's kind of more than the measurement often. So we take these actions and we look at them and say, well, actually, what can we do here? So I just thought that might be helpful to understand that we are actually doing more. That's no matter which report and which level, there's still those things going on where we're trying to assist those things for the future to make sure that all those opportunities are realised. Thank you.
Point taken, thank you. So that's an informal action that you will consider about the reporting. Or I do appreciate we've planted this paddock a few times, as it were. So has anyone got any other comments about our annual action plan for next year, which may be our last, possibly? I'm allowed to say that, or may not. Any more comments? So we've noted it and discussed it. Anyone happy with that? Right. How caffeine depleted are you? Enough. You'd like a break? Okay. Okay, shall we take a break till 11:15? Is that enough time for you to get caffeine? Okay, we'll break till 11:15. Is the coffee We have actually got an item 13, which has been snuck in, but doesn't actually in the agenda, which is the mobile connectivity review. Which you might have been like me fooled because it isn't in the agenda pack, but it is actually on the agenda. So the mobile connectivity review to consider the effectiveness of the committee's investigation on mobile connectivity. Did it match its objectives? Are there any improvements that could have been made and any recommendations that may be required? So anyone want to start in on that one? Probably. So Gray probably has something to say.
I think it went really well, actually. I think the additional time that we gave to scope out what we were really looking to do showed an evolution in our line of questioning, which then helped to inform our questions. And I think the questions allowed us to come to the meetings with the reps with the right terminology. We had a little bit of a better understanding of what we were asking and the particular terms that were required to get a response. I know we can't particularly talk about all the ins and outs of it, but the follow-up secondary meeting with Vodafone 3 was, I felt it was really, really good. I feel that may well have been one of the most beneficial meetings of lines of questioning that we've had. And the fact that most of the questions we had were already predominantly answered by the response by the rep tells me we're absolutely in the right wheelhouse. We knew where we needed to be. And that was largely thanks to Adam and the rest of us giving some time to really scope that out. And I think that should tell us as a committee a vast amount about what we should be looking to do when we come to invite people, and scoping those things, the sessions. I think that really worked well for us anyway. And I think in a nutshell, that's really where I want to leave it. It was really positive, and I think we need to do more of that. So I think it really worked.
Brilliant. That's nice to hear. Thank you for that. Anybody else? That's Heinrich.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was very impressed by the answers we got from Vodafone, certainly. It would be good if we could keep some pressure up on BT to turn up and answer a few, but since they can't even tell me when they're switching on broadband in North Yorkshire. Nor do they seem to tell the resellers who use their services. And so there's another comment, has its own equipment, which may be getting some business shortly. But, I wonder whether the questioning was excellent. I wonder whether we can actually use that same approach with our looting friends at Anglian Water next time we have them in front of us and try and tie them down. Our past experiences, we get nowhere, but it's worth a try.
But it was more insightful, if that's a word, insightful. I think there was, because that was informed by research, of course, which was helpful, but we know a fair amount about water now, don't we? So I think we could be much more focused in our questioning. And also probably a little bit more demanding in the answers, do you think? I mean, the Vodafone session was very forthcoming, which was useful. And that was very helpful. Did you feel you got the route map you needed to sort of improved service for our residents? And we had some of that information. Did you feel, I mean, obviously it's too far in the future. That's the big problem for us. But did you think you felt content with that? Councillor Gray and then Councillor Heinrich?
I think it's frustrating. We got some good information there. I wish there was more we could say about it. But I think off the back of that, some of the other actions that we discussed potentially taking will help to bear some fruition there, hopefully. I did notice, just a side thing here, I didn't particularly notice that we did achieve the outcome that we'd really said at the Vodafone 3 meeting of we wanted something that we could push out that would then help to encourage other providers to come forward. I haven't seen anything of that, so I don't know whether there was anything.
There was something, but there was a press release, but it's with comms at the moment, and I think there's some question about it.
Okay.
Coming out again as something we could use, but it hasn't quite got to the right stage yet. But I totally agree.
Okay.
That we do need to have something to encourage other people to come.
Absolutely.
So there is something being worked on.
Yeah, I think that's what we always need to look at. It always needs to be the consideration of what is the minimum outcome that we want from this that actually achieves something, isn't it?
It might not be quite what you expected. Like if you wanted, if you expected a concrete route map, it may not quite deliver that, but it's what we have. That's a hand.
Yeah, there did seem to be a couple of messages that came through to me, certainly. One is the issue of looking again at our planning policies regarding the masts. Without the mast, we can't have the service. And that seems to be an issue, I think, with all the providers. The other we can't think about is the lack of power networks in parts of the district. That's going to cause us an almighty problem with all sorts of developments over the next 10 to 15 years, far beyond mobile phone connectivity. But so that's only something we can lobby about. Whether we're in existence long enough to have any impact with that lobbying is another matter. But those are the two main things, I think. And at least the planning we can discuss as a council and eventually revise policies accordingly. Yeah.
I mean, we did actually come up with some very good suggestions and recommendations. I think the most important thing is to follow them up. I mean, because planning was one of them, wasn't it? And the question about the power resilience of the masts was something that we really need to follow up. And the mobile investment from the government, we need to follow up. Councillor Housden had some questions that can't be dealt with until he provides more detail. The not spot question, we have to get some more information to the MNOs about that. So I think we actually produced a lot of very good questions that we need to make sure we get answers to. That would be one of my recommendations, that we actually chase them through. And the planning was, I think we didn't quite get the planning on masts down as a recommendation, did we? We had the planning recommendation was for Councillor Brown to raise mobile connectivity at an earlier stage in big projects, wasn't it, rather than the actual masts? And do you think you need to stress that we should be looking at that?
Yes, I mean, we're in the position now where we now have to start another local plan, which involves looking at policies anyway, which will involve planning policy committee, my colleague behind me, and so that can all be looked at. My bigger concern is that with local government reform, we won't be around long to have any impact on it. At least we can set some demands in place and set some clear policy in place that hopefully a successor authority will follow through. But no masts, no service.
Yes,
we have to deal with that, and if planning is the issue, we have to look at ourselves for that one.
What's your take on the NPPF? Because there were some comments, wasn't there, from Vodafone that they'd put quite a lot of representation into it in terms of mast building.
Let's wait for the next version of it.
I understand it's been delayed. Is that correct?
As far as I'm aware, yes, it should have been out in late January, early February. And like so much from the government, you know, your timescales are flexible.
I mean, would it be something to keep an eye on for what aspects of the new NPPF actually pertain to planning for mobile infrastructure? Would that be something?
Certainly, because what is in the NPPF, we will need to adhere to.
Right.
If that is requiring us to be far more flexible, and
yes,
maybe a position we have that is classed as national infrastructure and has to be granted permission anyway, rather than the usual process and long delays when it gets to committee. So similar. No, I'd rather not lose the local input to people who are concerned about the environmental impact of a mast.
So do we need to formalise some sort of review of the new NPPF when it comes out to see whether it's got the sort of infrastructure requirements that we would see beneficial to mast building in this area? And grab hold of it.
Once it appears, a summary interpretation from this committee would be useful as we're investigating this whole service.
Okay, so what do people think about that as a recommendation? Because it does the work for us, doesn't it? The NPPF then, doesn't it?
Hopefully it could solve a lot of internal debate.
Yeah.
It does. What would you think about that, Mike?
Well, firstly, I'm sorry I missed the meeting with Vodafone and E. But for the first time, we got visibility on a solution and a time frame, which is quite incredible, you know, compared to the first meeting where it was our buts and ifs and there's lots of problems and challenges. So I've had two parish council meetings since then, and the fact that a sort of Star Wars, for want of a better expression, solution to the problem is available and is being tested this year for completion next year, I think it's fantastic, quite frankly. I think a lot of people, once that's proven to work, they'll go over to Vodafone E because it can provide them with a service. No masks, no whatever. So I think that they're to be commended on that. But, you know, what I now think we need to do, we need to get the other line,
Yes.
you know.
I feel we would have a more balanced view if we met with the others, wouldn't you? I mean, I feel as if I'm a Vodafone rep when I
Yeah.
go to parish council meetings, because I'm saying, obviously, I'm not saying everything that we would tell.
Yeah,
You
well,
know.
there we go. So I was very encouraged, and I imparted that situation to a couple of parish councils, and they thought, wow, you know, this is the first time we've had any visibility of a potential solution. So in that respect, it was a real tick.
It's a triumph, wasn't it? Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely great.
there you go. If I may, Chair, now, if I can take my leave for this meeting with
Yes,
the
it's-
monitoring officer,
yes, of
I'd
course.
appreciate that.
Thank you very much for coming. Yeah. That's a great.
While it was a private meeting, I think if anything else, it showed that we were viewed in a professional capacity in that moment. We weren't saw as a hostile entity towards that rep, and they were really forthcoming, hopefully off the back of whatever finally makes its way to the press release will allow us the leverage to then bring others to have that conversation. But I think if anything, looking at the term review, which is included in this item, it makes me think that, again, as conversations we've had, that there needs to be more structure to how we create our questions and how we go along in who do we talk to, what are we talking about, and narrowing it down. If we can really get that into some kind of methodology, I think we'd be able to speed it up slightly as well.
Yeah.
And save a lot of time.
Good point. Any other comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, for someone who brought this to this committee in the first place with a report, I'm grateful that you've continued this work and you continue to drive this forward. So thank you for that. Yeah, just the planning bit in that initial report that I brought to you, we did get the information from planners, and the vast majority go through uncontested, and it is about the engagement with us. And so maybe if you when you try to encourage others to come and talk to us, that they bring their delivery partners so they can understand that we want to be part of that conversation, to work with them delivering it. That may be helpful. I offer that as a suggestion as part of enabling us to deliver those few that are a challenge. So, but thank you to the committee for continuing on and to continue to do this work. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Okay, so the review of the new NPPF, that will be an action, would it, for our action tracker, so we don't lose sight of it? You think, Councillor Hannett?
When it appears, if
Yeah.
if it has relevant requirements in it, then yes, they could just be reported to this committee for us to planning.
You happy with that, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've added that to I can add that to the action tracker. If you don't want to make a recommendation, as long as the committee are happy, obviously that they want us to add that, then that's fine. If you don't want to make it a formal recommendation, I was going to say actually, Chair, as well, obviously because the Councillor Heinrich picked up on the points, the two main points that he was sort of felt was coming out of the meeting about the planning, yes, with the mouse, but also the I think the second part was with the, I can't remember now, so I'm not sorry about that. There was the second point that I remember you raising there quickly. And Vodafone are actually, if you remember, were lobbying the government on those 2 points. So I wasn't sure, obviously, if you, as a committee, if you wanted to consider as a possibility of supporting that movement, as obviously they were, in a letter to support what they are trying to do. It was about power resilience. Sorry, and obviously they were lobbying government themselves on that. So I don't know if you wanted to or minded to consider supporting that as a way of showing your support as a committee.
I think that would certainly be useful. It always amazes me with producing all this power offshore, but we're not benefiting from it because the power network's infrastructure in the county is so bad. As we said elsewhere, with the large developments in North Horsham and Faken and supposedly in Cromer itself, where is the power coming from? Where is the power coming from for vehicle charging? Another one that's
Is that
current
a-
oil prices is looking
Hmm.
increasingly important.
Is that a session with the UK Power Networks sort of thing, rather than lobbying the government, or both? What do you think? Because I mean, we could talk about that as part of our work programme setting for the rest of the year. Or is that could be put that on one side, but is there a lobbying for, there were two issues here. One's for the mast resilience. That was what they were lobbying for, wasn't it? For mast power.
It goes far beyond that.
Yeah. So there's two issues. Well, do you want to do, as far as the mobile connectivity review is concerned, do you want to lobby for the mast resilience? Because we have that as an action, don't we? We just need to pursue that. The other one is a bigger picture.
I think that would certainly be one aspect. I think if we're going to get them in, then let's broaden it.
Yeah.
And get some idea of how they're going to upgrade.
Yeah.
Not just North Norfolk, but I'm sure it's just as bad in West Norfolk and the Rutland as it is here, if not worse.
I would say, I do agree, you know, that's perfectly valid. Maybe we should explore that, but I'd be careful with broadening too much, because we know from experience with other people who visit us, if we're too broad, we receive broad responses and they don't really give us anything that we can do much with.
Okay. So we could talk about the broader picture in the work programme. I do think for me, the secret would be seeing the other MNOs, really, because we have a very sort of one-sided picture, not that it wasn't totally brilliant. I haven't found that we've had such a conduit to other MNOs from our original meeting that perhaps I had thought. It doesn't seem to be very, still doesn't seem to be a mechanism to really get through to a particular MNO with a particular problem. I haven't found any answer, really.
I'd say, like I've said many times, Mobile UK, it's great that they engaged, but it's like approaching the digital phone company. They're not Vodafone. They'll keep trying to convince you they are, but they aren't. We need to maybe continue to try, but I think, again, keep reiterating, it's the press and the fact we can get it out there that Vodafone were so forthcoming and so accommodating with the conversation and how professional it was. That will be what adds more pressure, I think, then for Adam, or I suspect Claire by that time, to actually then be able to apply some pressure and get somewhere with one of the other networks.
Absolutely, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I think it might be coming from the top of Vodafone, because have they not got a new or relatively new, very dynamic woman CEO? So maybe she's getting them to work in a more positive way with local authorities. Possibly.
There's a lot wrapped up in that question, then, I must say. But it's also, anyway, it was a very successful session. I still find it difficult to get into the MNOs with complaints, basically, which I feel is something that we should be doing, but we can only do our best. We have the parliamentary advisor for Vodafone, and that's as far as we've got, and even that hasn't resulted in any outcomes for me anyway.
I was going to say, Chair, obviously I'm just going to run through what you've sort of discussed to summarise that as what sort of actions are coming out. I was just going to say to follow up on our actions that we've got currently, that we've also got to follow those up and get some answers on those. To see the new MPBF for the infrastructure requirements to make sure that obviously they are meeting the needs for the digital connectivity. To maybe, as Councillor Gray was saying, maybe put like for the committee's sake, to put a methodology to the question setting, perhaps going forward. That obviously it seems to work really well, so we can maybe take that forward as a committee. And also, as you say, then Chair, to follow that up with the other MNOs and also maybe the delivery partners as well, as Councillor Harriott was saying. I mean, try and get them to come here together to answer some of those other questions that you followed up on. Does that does that cover everything the committee are happy for us to follow up on?
outside thought here, thinking about the MNOs, and this may lead nowhere. But we know that VNMOs exist as well, and those virtual operators access those trunk networks. Have we actually tried to contact any of the virtual operators, because they may come forward and they may still have information about their main trunk operator, which may be beneficial? It's a little out of the box thinking, but maybe something worth pursuing.
Think about Sky and those sorts of things.
Well, if you take O2, we know that giffgaff is a virtual operator on O2. If O2 wasn't forthcoming to have a discussion with us, well, giffgaff uses their network. They understand the network. They will have information that we don't currently have, and they might be forthcoming. Possibly, it's just a different avenue to look at there.
Good thought. Okay, do you want to add that to your list?
Yeah, absolutely. I've added that on if the committee are all
Are
happy
you
with
all
those
happy with those as informal
actions going forward.
actions? Yeah. Okay, so now we have agenda item 14, which is the notes from the OSC meeting in January. Has anyone read it? And I mean, the highlights for me really were that the fact that weekend testing, pathology testing was removed without consultation, and no really equality impact assessment being done. And it was a financially driven decision, and which was all rather disappointing, I must say. We are soon to hear whether an agreement about whether there's some weekend testing will come back any minute, but I haven't seen anything about that. But that was a bit of a shock, really, because it was the more deprived areas with their weekend testing that really needed them, and they didn't benefit from it at all. So that was rather disappointing. Palliative care, rather unsurprisingly, independent survey finding the provision inconsistent and variable. I think you probably could have said that without having an assessment. And the ICB quite rightly are looking at upskilling the generalist workforce and bringing it all together, which is very important. They also do need the specialist beds, which I thought they were possibly a little bit light on. So they are reviewing exactly what they need. Obviously, you want care at home wherever possible, but you also need specialist input, and really need to get the balance right. So I hope they do. And then the medicines support service, which has been in place for a while. So you could say it was outdated, but it was very popular and very successful. But the funding had already been removed, due to stop at the end of this month, actually. So something had to happen. And I think finding a transition plan and alternatives is fine, provided that there is the community support for that. And there was a question mark about that, and whether the community has the capacity to take it on. So more information to be provided on that, and definitely clarification of the decision-making process at Norfolk County Council to withdraw the funding, because that seemed to be somewhat of a surprise. And then there's the big issue of the change of provider at the Vulnerable People's Services in Norwich, which is possibly very impactful in a negative way. So we need to look at that. I'm seeing it now that it's on the September agenda, which is a bit further in the future than I expected. But they are looking at the validity of that. So does anyone have any questions on that? No? Okay. Good. So now we go on to the work programs. So I don't know if you're going to stay for this. It's more of a question for the members, the work program. And we decide what to do. You're free to go if you would like. Okay, so Adam, are you taking us through this?
Absolutely, yeah. I think obviously the action tracker we've probably covered off a lot with mobile connectivity. So in terms of the work programme, obviously April we've sort of set aside for our work setting session. few of you obviously, I think, met Claire yesterday, obviously, my colleague, Officer Stropland, who's going to sort of take that along with Officer Denny, obviously my manager, who will lead that sort of work setting session. So we're obviously really after any sort of suggestions and ideas that you maybe want to come to that meeting, because obviously we hopefully in that meeting we're going to set our work program for the year ahead. So that's sort of the idea. So we can set everything out, what we're going to scope, pretty much working what we were saying there with Councillor Gray, and then that methodology, we can really work into that then and give ourselves time, sufficient time to do all those items justice. So a lot of that April meeting is going to be in sort of a private session to do that that work setting session. There's not an awful lot actually coming through at the moment, as you can imagine, obviously with the election having been announced, and then obviously our next meeting as well happens in a period, obviously right in the middle of our sort of the pre-publicity period. So obviously we've got to be careful what we do see and what we do discuss. Obviously with other meetings are also getting cancelled around that, because obviously everybody's very, very busy with elections. So there is a cabinet meeting in April, before our meeting, obviously RNS as it is normally, and I'm sort of quite keen to follow up the flash, the fake and leisure item, because we're not really seeing an awful lot on that. And I hear that obviously that there is a sort of potential for just a very quick update coming through to cabinet that month. So hopefully we could see that if you would like us to. I think that wouldn't be a bad thing. I think that'd be a good thing for the committee, obviously, to see something on flash, because we're not seeing an awful lot recently. So that could probably be a sort of substantive item in April, and keep it quite light, because we're going into that work setting session in private. I also had a chat with the new Assistant Director for People Services, Officer Grant, who's just come into the post, and she was quite keen. Obviously, they do a lot anyway with us with the housing side and homelessness, but obviously she was quite keen, if you were happy, to maybe come along sometime to meet us, introduce herself. Probably good. I thought it'd be very good, probably from both ways, really. You could obviously give her a little bit of a steer on what you would like to maybe see from a local Norfolk level, in terms of what we can perhaps add value to. Again, might feed in nicely to that sort of work setting session if you wanted to, or later down the line. Give her a little bit of an opportunity then. Again, we could plan that in. She could bring a report, tell us if there's something there that she might be able to provide to us. And obviously she might be able to obviously equally give you guys a steer what she can potentially provide in terms of with the North Norfolk focus being on that really as well. So just a couple of little bits update for the April session really. May obviously is right after the meeting itself, is right after the election, and the agenda will go out sort of the week of the election. So I'm also minded there's no cabinet in May. I think Councillor Shiles is nodding confirmation there. Thank you, Councillor Shiles. And obviously the AGM, full council is the AGM as well. So I don't know if you also want to consider if it's worthwhile, again, know how busy everybody is again, especially now with the election being called, if there's a worthwhile, because we didn't really have anything on our May work programme. I think I put the corporate plan on there, but funnily enough, that shouldn't really be going into May. That should be June anyway, because it's every quarter. So we haven't really got anything on the work programme for May. So whether you want to consider and just discuss whether that is worthwhile perhaps going ahead, or maybe like the cabinet, you maybe just want to cancel that one and then push everything forward to June. Particularly again with the April work setting session, we're not going to see anything anyway, in terms of being able to scope anything out ready June at the earliest, really. So maybe want to consider that.
Another thing.
Yeah, cancelling the May one.
Yeah, can't cancel the May one. It'd give us time, whatever item we decide we're going to chase in our other meeting, to really get something out of it anyway, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And so April is flash and the first bite at the work programme. And thoughts about scoping?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think obviously that's more of the work setting. So anything you would like to suggest beforehand to us, any ideas, what we can, that gives us an opportunity to do then, probably more sort of Councillor Officer Denny and Officer Tropland, but they can score. I've actually put the guidance now for the criteria, make it a little bit easier on the bottom of the work programme. Because obviously then any ideas and suggestions that you have beforehand, they can sort of score and see how relevant that is to sort of us as a committee. And obviously then that doesn't say that you can't, obviously really want you to engage on the April meeting, because obviously it's really important for the year ahead that we can obviously set our work programme. And obviously anything you bring to that as well, we can consider, and then we can go through that guidance and that criteria and score it. And then obviously as a committee, you can agree what you want to see, what you want to consider, and when we want to see it. So.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, I think you did. I sort of say, so that's the sort of meetings programme setting session, but obviously the first time we'll probably scope anything out for a report is going to be probably later on, like June or something like that. So.
Okay. And Officer Denny, we've also got the deprivation data down on the work programme for April, but you felt there was a problem with the pre-publicity period?
No, I think following on from Adam's comments, I think Adam is moving over to the elections team to support them, so I'll be working with Claire to do the next couple of meetings. And I've just had a quick look at the work programme. We're going to have to do a bit of adjusting because I see cabinet is quite often the case that the cabinet items are different on there. But I will email members in the next week or so with a template for them to put items forward for the work programme, with a quick scoring thing of what you might want to consider as well, just so we've got something to work on in April, and it will help us plot them in throughout the year, and get that balance between scrutiny and overview items as well. But yeah, as I say, if anyone's got any questions, re-scrutiny in the next couple of months, come to me rather than to Adam, as he's going to be busy with elections, and Claire will be doing the committee support with my assistants.
Okay, so is everyone happy with that? Yeah. Okay, and so the future months are up in the air, presumably. Not really worth even thinking about.
Future items list on there, so we can review those when we look at the work programme setting as well, because I've you've actually probably got even more on your future items than you have actually scheduled in at the moment, including LGR, which obviously we're going to have to probably plot in relatively frequently, maybe even sort of every couple of months. And we've got the substance abuse item, we've got your housing, yeah, there's a lot on there. So I think we will bring that forward as part of your work programme setting too, and review those items, see if you still want them to come, and score them and then build them in. Most of them look as though we probably do still want them to come by the looks of it, but yeah, we can review those at the same time.
Yeah, is everyone comfortable with that approach? Yeah. Okay. Yes. I think then there being no need to exclude the press and public, you can call the meeting over. I hesitate to do that at any 10 to 12. We've all got things to do. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.